Minister Mentor will now deliver his eulogy.
Family and relatives of Dr. Keng Swee, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen. It was my good fortune to have strong men around me. Of all my cabinet colleagues, Keng Swee, who made the greatest difference to the outcome for Singapore. He had a capacious mind and a strong character. When he held a contrary view, he would challenge my decisions and make me re-examine the premises on which they were made. As a result, we reached better decisions for Singapore. In the middle of the crisis, his analysis was always sharp, with academic detachment and objectivity that reassured me. His robust approach to problems encouraged me to press on against seemingly impossible odds. If ever there was a slow developer, it was Keng Swee. He did not shine until he got to Raffles College, where he was the best student of his year in economics. I first met him there when he was my economics tutor in 1940-41. He had a large Adam's apple and a gruff voice as he mumbled his comments on the essays of the 5 students who appeared before him for tutorials. I did not then realize how sharp and clear a mind he had. We met again during the war when he was an impoverished government servant paid in Japanese banana notes. Our friendship developed when we were both in London in the 1949-50s, when he was studying at the London School of Economics on a scholarship. I was in London after Cambridge, preparing for my bar examinations. We shared a common view that we could run Singapore and Malaya better than the British colonial officials. We became close friends. Together with Kenny Byrne, Tojin Chai, and S. Rajaratnam, we planned to build a mass movement to form the basis of a political party, win elections, and take over from the colonialists. We were blissfully ignorant of the wide tentacles of the communist underground that gripped the Chinese educated world. By the time we discovered how ubiquitous the communists were in the Chinese schools, the universities, the clan associations, chambers of commerce, old boys associations, and almost any other association you can think of, they had their tentacles around us. Together with Dr. Goh, we planned and got rid of the communists. He was the thinker, we argued it out. I was the executor. We beat them in the referendum in 1962 to join Malaysia, where they know they would be cleaned up. And we won the general elections in September 1963. He was a hopeless campaign orator, but a formidable analytical mind. His writings were crisp, elegant, and forceful. After we joined Malaysia, he discovered that we had been ambushed. He stood up for our rights and fought to protect Singapore's interest against the Federal Finance Ministry, whose finance minister was his cousin, Mr. Tan Siew Sin, who was out to spite Singapore. After 2 years of constant friction and 2 race riots, in July 1965, he met with then Deputy Prime Minister Tun Abdul Razak and Minister of External Affairs Tun Dr. Ismail Abdul Rahman. I had asked him to negotiate a looser federation, a arrangement for Singapore, but to keep Singapore within the federation. He, on his own, decided, after discussions with them, that we should make a clean break. And he got Tun Razak and Dr. Ismail to agree. Eddie Barker and I then worked furiously to settle the terms of the agreement for separation. If the British knew of it, we would have been done in. So to avoid tipping them off, Barker and I arranged the constitutional amendments to be done with utmost secrecy, together with then Cabinet Secretary Wong Chui Sen, published by the National Printers, was all those involved were kept out of circulation until it was proclaimed. The constitutional amendments had to be done with utmost secrecy and executed in 3 readings of the legislation in 1 session of the Parliament in KL, and that was done on the 9th of August 1965. The Republic of Singapore became independent. He was my troubleshooter. I settled the political conditions so that his tough policies, which we together had formulated, could be executed. I gave him the toughest jobs in Parliament, in government. Ministry for Finance from 1969 to 65, when economic survival was crucial. The Ministry of Defense for Interior and Defense in 1965, when all we had were 2 battalions of the Singapore Infantry Regiment, which then had more Malaysians than Singaporean soldiers, and was under the command of a Singaporean Brigadier General Al-Sagoff, who was pro-Malaysia. When the British announced the withdrawal of their forces in 1967, I sent him back to the Ministry of Finance to deal with a loss of 20% of our GDP, with the withdrawal of the British military spending. When that problem was resolved, I sent him back in 1970 as Minister of Defense. He mastered defense matters, read up the classics on strategy, Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, Hitlerart. He subscribed to military journals to know the latest in military weaponry, and his only military background was as a corporal in the Singapore Volunteer Corps. He sent me books and articles, sideline and tract, insisting that I must know enough to decide what I had to approve. I had to read them to have a serious discussion with him on our options for strategy and arms purchases. He was the Armed Forces Chief of Staff. He built up the SAF that we now have, with a small group of 6 Israelis led by Lieutenant Colonel Azari, to learn how to build an armed force based on the total population of Singapore. He built up the SAF that we now have, an effective fighting force. He set up the Defense Science Organization for R&D and created several defense industries from scratch. Singapore Technologies Group now manufacture arms and ammunition and are into aerospace, electronics, and computer systems. After I merged Nanyang University with the University of Singapore, I appointed him Minister for Education. The dropout rate was high and many students left school illiterately. He had come across them as Hokkien soldiers who had to be instructed in Hokkien. He reorganized the schools into one national type. I had to persuade the people of Singapore to accept English as the language of instruction and of government, and the mother tongue as the second language. In 1981, I asked him to take charge of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, where our CPF and other reserves were managed. He set up the Government of Singapore Investment Corporation and built up the organization to invest and manage our growing reserves worldwide. He insisted that I should take charge as chairman and get to know how it runs. Many enduring organizations, a sturdy SAF, the Education Ministry that keeps abreast with the times, MAS, GIC, EDB, JTC, were built by Keng Swee and his close associate, Hon Swee Sen, Permanent Secretary of Finance and later Minister for Finance, when I persuaded him to go into politics. He wanted Singaporeans to appreciate the arts. He promoted the Singapore Symphony Orchestra, the Singapore Zoological Garden, Jurong Bird Park, Sentosa, Chinese Garden and Japanese Garden. He persuaded me to subsidize them for Singaporeans to have a feel for beauty and the arts. Yet he lived a simple and frugal life and managed Singapore's assets in the same way, avoiding waste and maximizing value for money. His prudence built up Singapore's reserves. Keng Swee and S. Rajaratnam helped me to select and ensure that we had a team of younger men who could take over the government without a drop in competence, drive, and dynamism. We began the system of identifying talented people to bring them into government. In his last major speech in 1984, he reminded newcomers to the PAP to regard the present condition of the Republic not as a pinnacle of achievement, but as a base from which to scale new heights. He then chose to retire in 1984. With his passing, we have lost a remarkable and outstanding son.